Welcome to Digitally Creative. I'm your host, Vincent Ferrari, and joining me this week, not from my shop as planned, but still the same guest as planned, I have Christian Neary from Warren Werks. What's going on, Christian?
How you doing, man? How's it going? I'm doing well. How are you, Vincent?
Good. We were going to record, so the plan was we were going to record Monday when you were in my shop, and of course, that was the plan, but then the logistics of the plan kind of fell apart because it's like, yeah, I'm going to record with 4 different cameras, try to get that working with the audio. I probably could have done it, given a little more time to plan it. I could have maybe gone a day earlier and set it all up. But then I was like, you know what? We'll just do it old school for now because I ordered myself something that I'm going to show off in future episodes. I haven't opened it yet. I've told Christian about it. Christian is as intrigued as I am.
I know what it is.
He sure does. But yeah, we had a nice little adventure Monday in my shop.
It was great. A whole last minute visit, not Vincent, yeah, it was perfect. I needed a little project engraved, and I messaged Vincent, and he was like, "Yeah, come on down." So we hung out and stuck it in his Glowforge, and I got to experience the Glowforge for the first time, which was really cool.
It's such a fun little machine. I know it. I've said it a lot here. I love it. I just wish it had. If they made a Glowforge XL, I would never buy anything else. I'm happy with the Glowforge. Yeah, I mean, they
will at some point.
They just dropped a new feature yesterday. So as we record this, I always like to let people know as we're recording. It's February 8th. So they had a big event yesterday, February 7th, and they announced something that I have no use for. But I can truly see where people their minds are going to be blown by it. They've essentially integrated DALL-E and Midjourney into the Glowforge app. So you could say, give me a picture of a husky surfing on a snowboard in, the middle of July.
Right.
And it'll give you an engravable. So one of the cool things they did was all the stuff that you pull up is designed to be engraved on the Glowforge. It's not just like a full color photo that you have to figure out. It's an engravable image straight off the bat. And I was like, I don't have a use for that, but I can truly see where a lot of people would really be excited about that. So
yeah, that's a cool feature.
Yeah. And of course it's only available if you have Glowforge Premium, which I do not, but
right.
It was weird having you in the shop because you're the second maker I've ever had in my shop, but only the first that I've ever actually worked on something with.
It was cool. You know what I loved about your shop? It was the only shop that I've ever been in that had wallpaper. And I actually really liked that. I was like, this is a cool aesthetic.
Yeah, it's funny because that room, so way back in the old days, there was another it's hard to describe, but there's a row of offices, and there used to be a hallway, and there was another row of offices opposite it. They ripped all of those out. That's where all that storage is. Those used to be more offices on that side.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then they, so my office was the conference room at one point.
Oh, that's crazy.
My shop was the conference room. It was the biggest office and it was perfect for a shop. It's a good size. I just wish it was about 8 feet longer and it would be a perfect shop. It would be the absolute perfect shop. It's a good size, but it would be a great size if it was about 8 feet longer.
I feel the same way about my shop. If I had an extra 8 feet, it would make a huge difference.
Right? Like, I'm not even trying to get greedy. I'm not saying double it. Like, no, just another half another normal size room right next to it would be perfect.
Right.
But I don't look gift horses in the mouth, and I don't pay rent for this shop. So, I am very, very happy where it is and how much I pay for it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't beat that.
Yeah, it keeps me going. So I met you like I've met most of my local friends at Jimmy's Speedway.
That's right. We did meet there.
I believe it was this past summer, right? I didn't meet you the summer before. It was this past summer.
This was the first time I went. Yep.
Oh, it was the first. Okay, perfect. So then it was definitely this summer then.
Yeah. Yep.
And you had you were just about to leave your day job at that point.
So at that time, I was part-time. I had just gone down to part-time, so I was there twice a week. I was only there Monday and Tuesday, and I was kind of just testing the waters. Well, I had initially tried to quit my job, and my boss talked me into staying part-time, which it actually made the transition a little bit easier because then I could just kind of slowly take on more work and ease into, pursuing woodworking full time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had just started that new schedule of 2 days a week.
Yeah, it's I loved being able to do that with my company. I did the same thing kind of. I mean, I was still kind of semi full time. I wasn't quite part time. I was semi full time. I just didn't do the day job on Fridays.
Oh,
And
nice.
that little bit of extra time, and I can totally respect you doing that because that I know how much that little bit of extra time, that extra day, I know how much it meant to me.
Oh,
So
sure.
it must have been crazy to have like only a couple of days at one place and then have all the rest of the times like, this is my thing now.
Yeah, the real difference that shocked me was when I actually went to completely doing my own thing full time was those 2 days. It felt like my time like doubled because I was like, I don't have to worry about anything else at all anymore.
Yeah.
And I was like, I hope 2 days more is enough. And it was like I had a whole extra week because I just didn't have to worry about anybody else's projects or anybody else's timelines. And
Sure. It does change. I mean, I know when I lost the day job, I your perspective on what you do changes a lot because it's like I'm not trying to cram as much as I can into like 2 or 3 days. I can come back tomorrow. It took, and I'm not going to lie, it took someone I was dating at the time. I had finished up on Sunday and I was like, and I was talking to her on the phone. And I said I was kind of bummed because I didn't feel like I got enough done over the weekend, and now I had to wait till Friday. And she goes, "Why?
What do you have to wait for Friday?"
Right. And she goes, "Just go to the shop tomorrow."
Right.
And it clicked in my head. Like I had been off my day job for 2 weeks before I realized, oh, right, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are open now too.
Yeah. So it was actually kind of funny. Like when I was getting ready to make the full leap and leave entirely, I didn't know exactly when I was going to do it. And I was in the middle of a project. I can't even remember which one, to be honest, but it was Sunday night and it was like 9 o'clock. And I was like, I have to start wrapping up and getting ready to go to bed. And I was like, I just don't want to do that right now. And so the next day I just told my boss, I said, I'm going to hang it up. And that was that.
Yeah.
And
you
haven't looked back since.
I love that. I love that the way I found out that you were doing this was through Jimmy.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Right? Like it's I mean, he brings so many people in our area together to begin with, but it was so
Absolutely.
cool hearing him go, "Hey, this guy, there was this guy you may have heard of," and I'm like, "Oh, look at him talking about someone I know. That's kind of crazy."
Yeah.
And he got really emotional because you actually thanked him for inspiring you to just pursue what you love rather than just slogging through a day job that you didn't anymore.
Yeah, one of the things about his podcast that he always talked about is, he says, well, what if you try something and it does work? Everybody always is worried about what happens if it doesn't work. And he said, look at it the other way. What happens if you go for it and it does? And that was all I needed to hear. And that was kind of what started my whole process of how am I going to get out of the day job? And when I first met him, I was a little bit starstruck. Like I pulled up my van and I was like, where do you want me to park? And he's like, oh, just pull out right there. He's standing in the parking lot. And I got out of my van and I was just like, dude, can I give you an effing hug? And he's like, yeah, man, what's up? And I was like, you've changed my life. Like you've made such an impact. And then to hear him talk about that on the show with you, I was working in my shop when I heard that, and I just stopped. Like I was about to run something through the table saw, and I just stood there in awe. I was like, I couldn't believe that he remembered all that, and it was really something that I was taken back by.
I've said it a million times, even on this show, but his recall is frightening. Like
that's exactly it, because there's 100 people there at least that day. I mean, who knows how many interactions he had?
I was so unprepared. So the first time I went to Jimmy Speedway was the year before.
Okay.
And there were only about 30 of us there. Like it wasn't a lot of people. It was super fun. And I had the greatest time ever. And I got to see people that I'd never seen in person. So I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going next year. Like I was so looking forward to it. Like I was ready to go.
I can't wait for this year.
And then I pulled into the parking lot this past summer. I couldn't even figure out where to park. And I'm like, oh my God, there's so many people here. Like, I couldn't figure out where to park. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to block Jimmy in because I know he isn't going anywhere.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I'm thinking that this summer is going to be even bigger because he's
Yeah,
talked about it a lot on his show, and
totally.
I don't know where people are going to park. Probably across the street would be my guess.
I think there's going to be a lot of people parking across the street this year because there's
Yeah.
just no way. Like, it's going to be crazy this year. I'm actually really looking forward to this year's more than I was even looking forward to last year, just because there's going to be so many people. And
Me
again,
too.
people that I know, people that I've come to look forward to this event, particularly because I get to hang out with them, you know?
Yeah, and you can totally keep your eye out. There will be a Warren Works cart at some point. In my typical fashion, it'll probably be getting done the night before, but
Mm.
I will definitely be building a cart this year. I've started to design it already, so I'm very excited to be building that.
I think one of the most fun parts of the event in general, you know, everybody talks about how Workbench Con, the most fun part is the networking. I think the
Right.
most fun part of Jimmy Speedway is the networking. Just getting to hang
Absolutely.
out like that after people have run around the track a few times, like at the end of the night, you and me and a whole bunch of other people were just kind of sitting around, just kind of just chatting. And it
Yeah.
was just the nicest, like just a bunch of just dudes just chilling, chatting.
Right. And I remember that was the first time I'd actually seen a maker knife in person, and I was like, "Whoa!" Like, and there was like 10 of them. Like everybody around that circle
Everybody
had
had
one, and that was really cool.
it's a great event. It's I think that's it's weird because we all get portrayed as makers. We get portrayed as like introverts and people who don't like social contact. And yet when you get
Yeah.
a bunch of us together, none of us can shut up. Like no one wants to leave first.
Right. Well, I mean, because we do this niche thing, and you talk to the average person about making stuff, and they don't connect with that as much. And then you have a whole group of people who identify like their whole life is based around this thing,
Right.
and you could just talk forever with these people.
Yeah.
And
And to be fair, most of the people, that's a good point because most of the people that I ever tell, you know, oh yeah, what do you do? Oh, I do woodworking and jewelry making and, you know, digital fabrication, all that stuff, digital design, graphic design. They're like, oh, that's cool. And that's about as far as the conversation ends up going. It's like, you
yeah,
know, occasionally I get to show people what I do. I'll show people something on my YouTube channel and it's like, oh, like I didn't know you did that. That's really neat, you know?
right.
But
I
we all respect that about each other. Like we love each other's expertise. Like I love talking to people about what they do more than I
yeah,
like talking about what I do.
and that's the beauty about the maker community, I think, is that people are so willing to share and talk. Like I used to be really into cars, and the car community was very negative. Like everyone wanted to kind of talk trash about everybody else's car, and there's just none of that here, or very little. Like people are always just like, check this out, and this is a cool thing that happened. And I think makers are just they're just good people.
I think I figured out what it is a long time ago. Whereas in other communities, the competitiveness is outwardly directed, where I'm competing with the people around me.
Right.
Makers compete inwardly. We compete with ourselves.
Absolutely.
We are only competing with our last project. I don't,
Yeah.
you know, when I make a piece of jewelry, I'm not making a piece of jewelry to be better than other people making jewelry. I'm making a piece of jewelry that's trying to be better than the last piece of jewelry I made. Something more interesting, something more colorful, doing something that I've never done before.
Right. Like what can I learn in this piece?
Yep.
And
Yep. And I'm
yeah,
not trying.
I don't look at it competitively. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you
you're
there.
fine. But
But
that's it, right? We're not competitive with other people. We're competitive
no,
with ourselves.
right. And I like that. Like I don't want competition. The whole reason I do this is almost to kind of get away from that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You are one of the things I love about your YouTube channel is its evolution from projects to you have really like thrown yourself into something that I think is utterly insane. And I am so enjoying watching you just achieve it. I mean, we are now 5 weeks in. Yeah, 5 weeks in, 6 weeks in, 6 weeks
I
in.
just did the sixth build. Yeah.
Yeah.
So six,
So the sixth, well, you just did the sixth build of the one
which
day
is
build
hanging right behind
challenge.
me, actually.
Yes, I love. By the way, when we started recording, the first thing I noticed was like, "Oh wow, you found a place for it." It didn't
I
end up.
did.
That one didn't end up in the shop.
No, I was worried about hanging them in the shop because they're glass, and I don't want them to get broken.
That was another thing. You did glass. Like, I never make picture frames with glass. Like, I was like, Jesus Christ, man, stop overachieving. You're making us look bad over here.
I love glass. Glass is a cool material, but it is kind of dangerous in
It
that
scares the
way.
hell out of me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
But yeah,
you got the idea from Jimmy to
I
do a
did.
project a week and write them on a deck of cards, shuffle the cards, pull one out, and see what you're making.
Yeah, he said something about that, and this was on a podcast a long time ago. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I went on a trip with some of my friends to Utah last winter, and I had just heard that episode, and I was like, I'm going to start writing ideas down. And this is last February. I was like, I'm going to do this, and so I'd written almost 50 ideas down, and um, I was just like, I need to start doing this, and then I kept putting it off. I was like, I don't know when I'm going to actually go about this, and then suddenly it was like almost New Year's, and I was like, if I'm going to actually do this, I'm just going to start it on January 1st. So I made the first video on January 1st, released it on New Year's Day, and so far we've got 6 more up, and we got 40 something more to go.
It's a perfect way to start the year. Like you
Yeah,
literally started this at the perfect time. I am so impressed by a couple of things. One, that you've kept it going consistently as well as you have. So kudos to you. I
knock
probably
on
would have
wood.
been frustrated or I definitely would have done the projects. It's getting the videos up that would have probably been lagging for me. So kudos on that. But number two, you had 52 freaking ideas. I don't have 52 ideas.
I have so many ideas. It's crazy. I mean, a lot of these ideas are just things around the house, though. Like I've had these posters for months. Like
Mhm.
I should build picture frames for those, and that's one of those things. It's like, oh, I'll get to that someday. And how many projects do you have that I'm going to get to that someday, and you just never do? So this is it kind of killing two birds with one stone. Is I'm getting all these projects done that I've wanted to do, and I'm making videos, so it's something that's fun to watch and share with everybody else, and it's just fun to put a spin on something and do something creative once a week that's not a customer project, and just
Yeah,
move on
so
with that.
So I was going to ask you that because I've done situations where I've tried to keep content going, on a specific schedule. And really the only thing that goes on my YouTube channel on a consistent schedule is this actual show, which is fine with me because this show is I don't mind being known by this show. And then, occasionally have a build or a project or a resto or whatever. How do you manage to fit that weekly project in with client work? Because I don't know if we've made it clear enough so far, but client work is where you're making your money right now. Your
It
client
is.
work is essentially your day job. So
Um,
how are you balancing these two things to keep both of them going?
there's just not a lot of balance. It's just I'm in my shop almost all the time. Like I have an install that I'm doing tomorrow, and I'm just wrapping some of that stuff up. Like I was in my shop until 3 o'clock this morning, and so I just work a lot. And Sundays, every day, every week on Sunday, that's what I do my 1 day build. So the whole day I spend doing the build, and then usually that night I'll try to throw the edit
So
together.
so you're legitimately doing these in one day. You're not doing like I know there've been a couple where it's like, okay, you had to wait for glue to dry, so you've only
Yeah,
put 1 day of hours into it. I think everyone
right.
understands that that's the only way that it'll happen. But you're legitimately doing these in one day.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, there have been times, I've put finish on the next morning, or put finish on, and then the next
Right.
morning I'll finish it up or whatever it is, and but that's really the goal, is to try to do it in 1 day. And one of the oddballs I threw in there is a 1 day chair build, which I have no idea how I'm going to build a chair in a day, but I'm going to figure it out. And that one I have to do in 1 day because it's just that part of the challenge, and I think that's going to be really
I bet
fun
you're
when that one
hoping
comes
that
out.
card comes up in like November. Like you don't want that card to come up anytime soon.
I don't care if it comes up soon. I just don't want to be in the middle of a big client project when it does. That's my biggest fear.
What out of the cards that you put? I mean, I know what's on all of them. You just don't know when you're going to pull them. Are there any in there where you're going, oof, how am I doing that in a day? Like, obviously a chair is one of them, but do you have any others where
There's
you go,
one. I'm trying to think. It's honestly, even though I had them all written down, it's hard to remember what they all are. There's ones that I'm looking forward to.
oh,
Like I'm
okay.
gonna build. Well, so you were talking about how we were sitting around at Jimmy's Speedway. We were all just hanging out talking, and he pulled out of his pocket this little tiny ice pick, and he was like, "This is the smallest ice pick in existence." So um, I'm going to try to build a smaller ice pick than that. That's going to be one of my one day builds. And when that's done, I'm just going to send it to him because I think that's funny. And
I love that thing. Was cool as hell. The micro. It's smaller than the
yeah,
mini. He's got the
yeah.
micro too.
So I can't wait for that one. I'm really looking forward to that one. And but those are the kind of the only two that I remember. There's one that's just like make a piece of wall art. It's just so something random.
Mm.
And there's a couple like that, like scrap metal challenge and a scrap wood challenge. So they're a little bit open ended, and those I'm really looking forward to because then it's just like the sky is the limit.
It's interesting you said scrap metal. So where are you? I know your core competency is obviously woodworking, but I didn't know you were into metal, or are you going to figure that out in one day too?
So to be honest with you, I actually have more legitimate training in metal. I went to school for machining. Yeah, I actually have this. These are some machining projects I made when I was at school. This is a tape measure and
that's awesome.
This little cube.
Dude, that's beautiful.
Isn't that cool?
Holy crap, that is so cool. I really hope, I always tell people this, I really hope y'all are watching on YouTube to see those two projects.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay,
so
cool.
It's so I went to school I took the manufacturing program and we learned about machining, and we had a really good state of the art shop that had just had like $6 million of grant money or something. So there's all brand new Bridgeports and CNC machines.
Wow.
So that was really a fun courses to take. And then I took the welding classes too. And then my last job I was welding. So I welded professionally for about 4.5 years. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So I technically probably have more experience in metalwork, but I do find more joy in woodworking. It's just, I find more beauty in the wood, the grain, and I'm much faster at woodwork, which I think helps.
There's a certain, no matter what, there's a certain zen to woodworking that I don't think metalworking has. Metalworking is more like mechanical. Yeah. And I don't mean the stuff I mean just the processes and what it looks like. There's no, oh boy, metalworkers are just going to rip me when I say this, but there's no softness to metal. There's no like organicness to it. It's very rigid and regimented, and that's not a bad thing. It's just a different thing. It's like working with polymer clay versus working with wood. Polymer clay, you can make it into anything, and it's just a different thing. I personally, I'm fascinated by metalwork. I don't really want to do a whole lot of it. Like I really like woodworking. Like I like it a lot.
I mean, I definitely enjoy metalwork, but I'm happy I'm not doing it every day anymore. And that's the thing too. Metalwork is just so much like filthier. You get that black grinding dust all over you. Like woodwork, you get dusty, but you just blow it off and you're kind of good to go.
When I do any kind of like metal jewelry in my shop, in my craft room in my apartment, which is the worst thing to do. But the number of days after which that I find like brass dust and copper dust and steel dust is amazing to me. It's like you think you cleaned it up and you're sitting there and you feel like your table's like gritty. Like, what's all this? And you run your finger down it and your fingers are like copper colored. And it's like, you can't get this stuff out of here. Like,
can't get it out. Yeah. I mean, look at my hands right now. And I was doing some welding last night. One of the pieces I'm making right now is for this coffee shop, and it's this kind of long bar seating area, and it has a whole metal surround, and it's just a little bit of welding and grinding, and then here I am. I scrubbed my hands for probably 10 minutes last night, and you just can't get it out.
That's my dad's hands always had like wood embedded in them. Like you can tell, like he just had those carpenter hands. Like it's hard. Oh yeah, those dried out freaking carpenter hands.
Like sandpaper.
Yeah, it's because it sucks. That sand, the dust just sucks all the moisture right out of your skin.
Yeah,
first world problems, of course.
Oh, for sure. But that was one of probably the weirdest benefits to being a welder is my hands. I could hold really, really hot stuff, and that's dwindled off a little bit. But I was at a Mexican restaurant one time, and the waiter came out, and he had the towel on the plate, and he was like, "Careful, this is hot." And I was like, "No, that's okay." And I just grabbed it out of his hand, and he was like, "Oh my God, you're gonna burn yourself!" And my friend's eyes kind of opened up, and I was like, "No, it's okay. I'm a welder. Like, no big deal." And that was kind of fun. I can't do that anymore because I don't weld every day. but
So
that was a
I was looking through before we started recording. I was looking through your Instagram to kind of just, I always like to just give a quick look just to refresh my memory. And one of the
sure.
projects that comes up that you have pinned at the top of the page is a set of stairs.
Yep.
And I was telling the story. So for those of you that weren't in on the conversation before I started recording, which is all of you, I was telling Christian that when I was scrolling through my feed, I saw those stairs and I was like, okay, that's cool. Cause I follow a lot of like woodworker interior type accounts where they make stuff that I'm not going to make. I just like looking at cool wood stuff sometimes. And I'm scrolling through, I'm like, oh, those are kind of cool. Who made that? And it was you. And I'm
That was
like,
me.
wait, what? And I think one of the things that comes through is, and has come through even more since you've gone full time, is that you are absolutely fearless when it comes to the projects you select to do.
So
It's kind of one of those things that like I really vibe with that because I'm not going to, so I can live vicariously through you and let you be the fearless one, and I'm totally cool with that. But like the stuff you make is it's so big.
it's too big for my shop, but I figure it out. One of the best pieces of advice I got when I was first starting this out, I was talking to my uncle, who's a total hero of mine, and
Mhm.
he's a woodworker, and now he's a designer. And I was just picking his brain, and he said, like, if you ever have a project that you come across that's a little bit out of your comfort zone, and I'm getting ready to hear him say, you don't want to go too far. And he said, you definitely want to take that project on. And I was like, oh, that's not what I expected him to say. He said, because those are the ones where you learn the most.
Mhm.
And that was one of those projects where it really rang true. I first was asked to just design the staircase. And so I designed it. And then the person that I built it for, he was actually one of my cousins. He was like, so what do you say? You want to actually just build this thing? And I was like, I don't know. And I was like thinking about each step, and I was like, I don't see any reason I can't build this. And so I said, yeah, why not? And let's go for it. And sure enough, we got it in there, and I built this whole staircase. I have pictures of it, the whole thing laid out in my shop. And my shop is, I think it's about 19 feet by 9 or something like that.
It's very similar size to mine.
Yeah, that might not even be correct. Whatever it is, maybe it's 17, because I think it's right around 175 square feet. It's not
Yeah, it's about the
big.
same size as mine. Mine is
So
19 by 16.
yeah.
Yeah.
So in this staircase just took up the entire thing, and it was just really funny. And I was building it. I was like, what am I doing here? Like, this is way over my head. But I had the confidence to say, I'll figure it out. One way or another, we'll get it done.
It's pretty impressive. I mean, it's not the only impressive project you have, but it was one of those where it almost seemed like, wow, somebody I know made that. Like, that's kind of cool.
It is cool, and that's probably my proudest project. And I also have to say, like, my brother, I live with my brother, and he's always willing to give me an extra hand moving stuff around, and he's a total unsung hero that lets all of this happen. And but that was another project that happened about a year ago. I was maybe a little more than that. I did this big cabinet job, and the company that had asked me to quote it out, they had me quote out a cabinet job, and that one didn't come through. And then they sent me another one, and I was like, that's above my head. Like, I probably can't pull that off. So I just kind of sent a big number, and I was like, we'll see what happens. And then I was at work. This one, I was still working there full time. And they're like, yep, good to go. Send us the invoice for 50%. And I was like, oh crap, now I have to figure this out. And
my FU number got accepted. What do I do?
Yeah, so I've kind of put myself in the situation a couple times where it's like, you have no choice. Like, you just do it one way or another. And there's Jimmy's voice in the back of my head too. Like, if all goes wrong, you can always just give the money back, which I've never done. I never actually want to do that, but there's always a way to figure something out. And you go to school on the first one, like he says too. So
it's crazy, right? Like, how many times have you just think about how many times you've thought about the stuff that he said in the last, and this is when I always try, I get nervous about being too gushy about Jimmy, but there's so many times where you're up against the wall and something he said in passing, and as they're closing out the show, and it's like, yeah, by the way, stop worrying if everything goes wrong. What if everything goes right? And it's like, okay, bye. See you next week. And it's like, okay, cool.
that him saying that from 5 seconds, like, can change the course of somebody's life. And that's why, I mean, I praise him. I'm a huge fan of his, obviously, but
Mhm.
it's because he's had a major impact on so many of us. And
I think that's the, when talking about this community, the fact that someone in this community can inspire you to kind of pursue a dream that you have, and be a happier person, pursue a career that has more meaning for you. I mean, I always talk about how Bob is like my maker father.
right,
Bob inspired me to get off the couch and be a maker. Did he inspire the maker that I am today? Maybe not directly, right? Because I don't know
right,
that what I do has much relation to anything Bob does. But the fact that I do anything in any shop anywhere, that's Bob. Like it's Bob. It's David Picciuto, who I'm wearing a Make Something shirt, and
we both are
you
with
are
you.
wearing a Make Something shirt. It was Bob, it was David Picciuto, and it was Steve Ramsey. Those were the
Steve
first
Ramsey was
three
a big one
makers.
for me too.
Yeah, the first three makers who really got me to do this were those three guys. And then
Right,
later on, through them, I found Jimmy, and I found a whole bunch of other people. And it's like you start meeting all these people, and it's like every one of them inspires you in a different way. Some inspire you to just stop complaining and just do something. Some of them inspire you to push yourself a little harder than you're comfortable pushing yourself. Some of them, may inspire you to, instead of just doing it in isolation in your shop, to maybe record it and maybe turn it into content.
sure.
There's always, it's amazing how many people around us are just pushing us in some way or another to just be better at what we do, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember watching some of the early Wood Whisperer videos, and just like one of the first videos of his I remember watching was how to make a crosscut sled. And I had this really crappy table saw that I found on the side of the road. This thing was super sketchy. I'm surprised my mom even let me take it home. But and so I tried to make a crosscut sled for it, and I'm looking at his shop, and he has all these, beautiful tools. And that was the first time I remember being younger thinking like, oh, I could do that too if I had all those tools. And it's like, that's such a poor way to go about thinking it. And then here I am years later, and I have a shop full of tools, and I'm like, I hope nobody views me that way, because, we all started in a basement or somewhere with just the little things. And, it's years and years of building up.
I'm 6 years into my making journey, and that's how I have all the tools I have. It took
Right.
6 years to get all these tools.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think it's funny you mentioned that, because I've gotten that comment. Oh, I would have been, I could totally do that if I had a Glowforge or a CNC too. It's like, well,
Right.
work.
And that's exactly it. Like, all the tools have been paid for by the other tools.
Yeah.
Like, that's where they came from.
I didn't start here. This is the thing that people don't understand, right? And we have to remember at times, when you're putting stuff out to Instagram and YouTube, it's not just the people in the community that are seeing them, it's people outside the community, and they just
Right.
don't understand.
No.
What they don't understand is I didn't walk into the shop I have today. The shop
Right.
I have today is the process of 6 years of refinement, selling, buying, using one tool to make enough money to buy another tool. This doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in one shot. I don't know anyone that literally just said, I'm going to start doing this, and bought a shop full of tools and
Yeah,
then
no, that
worked in
doesn't
the same
happen.
tools for 6 years.
Right. I mean, even if you go to my YouTube channel and you watch my first video, I think it's called Making a Nautical Bar or something like that.
Mhm.
Like, you'll see there's a lot of tools that I have now that I didn't have then. And that's just been, because that video I posted a little over a year ago, but I built that, I made that video, or made that project quite a while before that. And it is just an evolution. And even still, I try to be conscious of that, though. Like this last video I just did where I built these picture frames, I said in the video, usually I would just use a domino on the corners, but most people aren't going to have a domino. So
Right.
I was like, here's a little more of a how-to approach if you don't have this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think what happens with people who are saying, if I had this, I would be able to. Those are people that are just never going to make anything,
they're
because
never going to get there.
they're never going to have enough to feel comfortable starting, and they're justifying the fact that they've done nothing but watch other people make stuff, right?
Right.
That's what it is. They don't understand that for the most part, all of us have made trade-offs and compromises over the years to get to where we are. Like, I don't have a full-size table saw, right?
Right.
But what have I learned? Well, I've got a really good miter gauge, and that
Yep.
compensates for a lot of the
Yeah.
size of the table saw. I've learned how to be comfortable pulling things through in reverse, which is terrifying the first time you do it, but it's not so scary. And now it's like all my
I'm
cutting boards
scared to
get
do
trimmed
that,
that
to
way.
be honest with you.
It's terrifying, right? But I was telling Christian when he was in my shop, I don't need my miter saw anymore. Like I actually asked you if you wanted it, and you're like, I don't need it either. I'm like, okay, cool. But I've gotten to the point now where I don't need my miter saw anymore, and the reason I don't need it is because I've worked around moving it in and out of my shop, which is what I would have to do to actually make use of it. I've worked around using it in and out of my shop so many times that I've gotten used to just not even bothering. I'll just grab the
Right.
table saw and just deal with it that way. If I need to cut something longer, all right, yeah, maybe I'll take it out and I'll do a whole bunch of long cuts. But other than that, thing sits outside my shop now
Well, and
almost exclusively.
I mean, I make huge use of the outdoors. Like when I do a big
Yeah,
cabinet project, if it's nice outside, they're all sitting outside, like
yeah,
until and I'll move stuff around, and that's the thing too. Like it's just working with what you got, and
yep,
that
yep. I mean, I worked in my basement. I worked in my basement. I mean, one of the things I like to tell people, one of my favorite proud moments was before I started getting chemo and radiation in 2018.
yep,
I recognized that I had a problem immediately, that all my tools were on the floor and I would lift them up and put them on my workbench to
right,
use them. Well, that's not sustainable when you're weak and hurt.
no,
And one weekend, I spent the entire weekend in my shop putting every single thing in my shop on wheels.
yeah,
Everything.
that makes a
And
huge difference.
it's incredible because I didn't even realize, yeah, it's practical for obvious reasons, right? But now it's like, oh my God, it makes, oh, I want to change this around. No problem. Unlock the wheels, move it around, lock the wheels again. Now you have a whole new shop arrangement.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I had to work around the limitations of my own body. It
Right.
wasn't easy, right? And the idea that I just walk into my shop is like, oh yeah, no, I can just make anything. Look, everything's on wheels. It's all set up. Yeah, it's all set up because I devoted a weekend to
Yeah,
making it that way.
absolutely. And that's one of the things that I've always liked to do too. Like on in my shop, I have this tool cabinet that's full of all my handheld power tools. And I made that because I had a gap in time where I didn't have any client projects. And I was like, well, this will be a good learning process. I can make some doors and I can make this cabinet. And now I'll have this, beautiful maple and mahogany cabinet in my shop, which is totally over the top, but this is a great learning experience. And now my shop is one of those places where it's like my Zen place. It's the place I go where it's just me. So I do everything I can to make my shop look really nice because I want it to reflect myself and I want it to be welcoming to me because I'm going to be in there every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, I will take the extra time to make an over the top tool cabinet rather than going to Home Depot and buying something for $50 or whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always say that I would rather not be making shop furniture and I
Yep.
would buy it if I could. But what ends up happening is I look at those beautiful husky toolboxes with the wood tops and I'm like, that would be perfect for my shop. Like if I could put them all along the walls of my
Oh
shop
yeah.
and just get like 10 of those, life would be great, but that would be $7,000 worth of
Right.
toolboxes,
Right.
and I know that people think all the tools in my shop, I have $25,000 worth of tools in my shop. I promise you, I don't.
Right.
It's like I don't. Nobody
Well, and
does.
just because you do doesn't mean you can go out and spend a couple grand on toolboxes.
Right. If I have
you know,
$10,000 in tools, I'm probably not liquid enough
I'm
for
probably
tools.
broke.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, so what have you, in your experience now that you are, you're not just throwing up a video as the idea hits you or throwing up a video whenever, what's your experience been like? And what have you learned so far in doing this 1 day build challenge?
The nice part about it is because the cards, like I draw a card and it's decided, I don't have to think about what kind of video am I going to do next week.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes some pressure off. But the best part too is since I'm doing it regularly, I'm not a computer or tech savvy person per se, but I'm much more familiar with the editing programs for the thumbnails and for I just use iMovie, but I'm getting so much better at it because I'm doing it every week and I'm getting faster at it. And it's the same thing with any skill, just the more time you put into it. But since I'm doing it on a regular basis, I'm finding that I'm becoming a lot more efficient in my editing process, and that's been really enjoyable.
Any tips for people that are looking to take on something similar, or anything that you learned specifically, like, oh, didn't expect that, but that's cool to know?
I'm trying to think. The one of the tips that, again, I mean, I'm not just trying to talk about Jimmy, but I just heard him say this, in one of his podcasts. When he edits, he drags all the clips and puts them in the timeline. And that's something I've never done before until the last video I just did. Like, I was taking each clip and dragging it in individually. And I was like, why wouldn't I just drag them all in? Like, that saves so much time.
Yeah, trim each one to tell the story. I learned that exact thing a few years ago.
Yep.
As just a speed up thing. And where the reason I learned it was because I missed clips. Like, because I was telling the story. I was telling the story because they always tell you when you're making a video to tell a story, beginning, middle, end, right?
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, well, and I'm going through the process in my head. I'm like, okay, so this was the next thing I did. Okay, there's the video of that. This is the next thing I did. There's the video of that. And I render out the video. And then I'll upload it. And I'll be like, yes, new video, yay. And I'll watch it and I'll go, I thought I had footage of that. And
Right.
I'll look and there it is. And why is it there? Well, I was telling the story and I found one clip, but I didn't realize I had 4.
Gotcha. Yep.
And I did that so many times. And finally, it just got to the point where I was like, I am just dumping everything in the timeline and I will sort it and deal with it on the timeline, but it'll be in front of me. And I can look at a clip and go, I don't need this clip, but at least I'll see it and I'll have to self-edit on the fly while it's in front of me. So that's a good tip. And I didn't even realize, I just do it. So I didn't even think of it as something I would explain to other people to do, but that's a really good tip.
It made a huge difference. And it also made me aware of how much I'm shooting. Like, I'm probably shooting way more than I need to. I mean, that was a 10-minute video and it was an hour and a half of footage.
Oh, yeah. Oh God. The shop vlog that I did, the 2-day shop vlog I did, I had hours of footage.
Yeah,
hours.
I believe it.
And in the end, it was a 16-minute video.
Right. And a lot of it too is like I speed up a lot of stuff. So,
Sure.
I'll take a 20-second clip and turn it into a 4-second clip. So that's a lot of that gets consolidated that way. But yeah, it's just a learning process. I mean, I still don't know what I'm doing. Most people, probably nobody knows this about me, and I hope that nobody really goes and digs too deep. But this is not my first time on YouTube. I have a car channel that I did like 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh,
Actually,
wow.
maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah, and I did a weekly video for that for the most part, and that was terrible. That was all handheld with the iPhone, which there's nothing wrong with it, but I watch those videos now just to kind of reminisce, and I'm like, I can't even tell what I'm saying. Like, and I'm the one who made this video, so...
Yeah, I was smart. I've had 3 different. This is my 3rd YouTube channel. The prior 2 are gone, never to be seen again. They will never be seen.
Mine, I hope nobody finds. I mean, it's got like 1,500 subs, but I don't want to take it down because once in a while it's fun to just go back and like revisit that time in my life.
I have all the videos from those channels on my NAS. I have every single video. But they will never be seen by the public again. Like, it's just never going to happen.
I don't blame you. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I might at some point. We'll see.
It's funny. Editing is one of those funny things because, this show used to be audio only back in ye olden days. And when I rebooted it and started Digitally Creative, I'm like, this really should be video because we're going to be talking about a lot of visual stuff. And I don't mind that way more people listen to it than watch it. And I totally understand that. And that's why there's 2 versions of it. But man, doing this every week, the editing, oh my God, like I have learned so much about stuff. And I was competent editing before this came out. Like, I had YouTube videos. I knew what I was doing. I kind of knew a look I wanted. I knew how to put a video together. But doing it routinely and kind of also doing it cohesively. That's the other thing that I found. Like, I wanted this to be not just a recording of the show, but I wanted it to be kind of on brand. So all the lower thirds are the same font and the same color, and the logo is in the same spot, and the text all matches. The transitions are all smooth as I can make them, with what I'm given. I realized all these little details that I've just been improving a little bit every week, doing something else a little different. And wow, you go back now and watch the first episode and you watch, the one I just did with Nick last week. And it's like, oh, wow, he has learned a lot.
Sure. And that's the cool thing. I mean, I use Spotify, and the cool thing is that Spotify gives you the video too. So just this morning I was listening to the one with Nick, and he was showing something, and I was able to just pull my phone out of my pocket and actually look at it. And it was like, oh, cool. Like that adds a totally different element that most podcasts don't have. And I really enjoy that.
It was so, as we were talking, he is the perfect guest.
Absolutely. That was a great show, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Nick's a great dude. He's what I like about Nick is like the perfect guest for a podcast, because Nick is one of those guys where you turn the wind up key and you just let him loose and he will talk. Like, he will tell you the story and it's like, this is good. I don't have to say a word.
Right. Yeah.
The host's dream.
Yep. And he'll just go. And he had a lot of good stuff to say.
Speaking of people that motivate, a perfect example, that exact philosophy. I was listening to David Picciuto on Making It. I got way back when Ethan and I were doing this show, we got a recommendation because Jimmy was on Because We Make at the end of 2021. Yeah, at the end of 2021, Jimmy was on the podcast. And, we were chatting about stuff, and he gave us a recommendation. And I was like, oh, God, we're going to blow up now. And it was a big episode for us. In that episode, David Picciuto recommended somebody else that did interviews. And he said that one of the things he loved about their interviews was that the host would basically kind of set the table and start the guest and then just kind of pull back and just let the guest talk.
What's funny?
It wasn't just host the whole show. And it made me very self-conscious.
No, I think you're great about that. But I think what you're talking about is he talked about Hot Ones, right?
Might have been Hot Ones, yeah.
I kind of remember him saying that. And so another podcast I like a lot is Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. Mm-hmm. And that's like, I don't care about movie stars and celebrities at all. And most of his podcasts are interviewing movie stars and celebrities. But his way of interviewing and the questions he asks are really unique. And I find the same thing with your podcast. Like, there are people I don't know and I'll listen to and I'll be like, that was a great question. You talk about when you had Jimmy on, like, everybody knows, how to use a bandsaw and you started in a sign shop. We don't need to hear another podcast about that. And you'll ask him a question that's a total oddball. And it's like, you're going to hear something you've never heard before.
I was so nervous the first time about having him on because, some people you just hear so many times, and it's not a bad thing. I understand, like, every person that does a podcast in our space wants to talk to Jimmy, right?
Right.
Everybody does. And of course they do, because he's a celebrity. You want to talk to your Bob and your Jimmy. You can basically, I think most of us makers can probably make a top 10 list of people we want to talk to, and then find the longer running podcast have spoken to all of them. Because it's like, that's your bucket list of people that you want to talk to. And the one thing I appreciate so much is when I listen to someone talk to somebody I've heard a million times and I learn something new about them, because it's like, that's someone who's just doing their job as a host. It's not about having their presence in your presence. It's about bringing something out of them that brings value to your show and gets them talking about something that no one's ever gotten them to talk about. And I may not be the best at that, but I always try to do that.
You're darn good at it.
That's what I shoot for.
I mean, there was a podcast, and I won't name it because I don't want to, throw anybody under the bus, but they had a guest on, and one of the questions they asked, I was a guest that I know really well or have been following forever. I've never actually met this person, but they asked, what are the 3 tools you would recommend? And I was like, oh, come on. Like, how many people need to be asked that question? Like, if you're a woodworker and your first answer is not a table saw, you're going to answer a table saw is the most important tool that you need. Most likely, I think 99% of woodworkers would agree with that. Power tools, at least.
I think what should happen with a question like that, like, I know Making Our Way asks a question very similar to that. And I think one of the things that they do that's very clever, they kind of know the answer is not going to be typical. Like
Right.
they know the people to ask the question to.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know, and I think that's just part of being a decent host, like knowing your guests. Like I always say, I won't have you on this podcast if I don't know your work, even if your work is
Right.
exceptional. Like if I get pitched, I'm literally in my inbox right now. I have 3 guest pitches from agents, and
Oh,
they're
wow.
just sitting there, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with these because I could tell them, give me about a month to familiarize myself with the work of this person,
Sure.
and I will totally have them on.
Yep.
But then in my mind, I'm thinking, is a month enough time? Like, are you going to be as comfortable talking to this person in a month? The answer is probably no. And I
Right.
think one of the things that separates the podcasts I like from the ones that I listen to as background noise is how familiar they are with their guests. You know, when somebody comes on their show, do they take out a piece of paper that has their standard list of questions and they checkbox them as they're talking to the person?
Yeah.
You know,
it's like a coffee date interview sometimes, and it's like I don't think most people enjoy listening to that. At least I don't, and I listen to more podcasts than anybody I know because I'm in my shop 8 or 10 hours a day, and I'm listening to podcasts most of it.
I know not everyone loves him, and that's fine. I'm not here to debate his merits, but Joe Rogan is a model podcaster.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you there.
I'm not going to apologize for loving Joe Rogan and his show. I'm not, and I'm not going to expect people to come along on the Joe Rogan train. I get it. He's not for everybody, and that's fine. But what I will say is, if you're starting a podcast, or if you're just getting into it, or if you're trying to get you want to get your numbers up or your engagement higher, or you want people to respect your show more, listen to about 4 episodes of what he does, because I think he is the prototype for what a good interviewer and a good podcast is.
Well,
I mean, really do.
There's a skill set in being able to talk to somebody for 3 hours or however long his shows are. And if it's somebody I know, like I'm a huge Counting Crows fan. A lot of people who know me know that. And Adam Dirts, the front man of the Counting Crows, was on Joe Rogan a while ago. And you learn so many stories with a good interviewer that you probably would have never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he talked about how his only car is his Carmen Ghia, and it's like, oh, that's a cool thing. Like, Bob has one of those too.
Bob has one of those. Yep.
and I've got a Beetle. Like, so I feel like I'm kind of in that same, that niche of old Volkswagens. And
I really want to be able to just have someone on the show like that and just pick their brain for an hour and call it a day. And I've aimed for that, and I didn't realize how, when I started listening to Rogan, it really solidified what I want to do with this show more. Like, I really want to have those conversations. Like, I'll come in with, like, I'm going to have this person on, we'll talk about this stuff and then see where it goes. A lot of times, we'll end the conversation. I'll go, well, that didn't go where I thought it was going to go, but that was cool.
Yeah, but that's kind of the best case scenario. If you can learn some new things, and you have to be able
to take what people say
and work with it,
and be present. And one of the good parts about, I've been doing podcasts since 2006. So one of the things I've learned over the years is I don't take notes, and I don't have a pad of paper in front of me. I don't have a list of questions in front of me. I don't have questions anywhere. I don't have them near me. I just listen and talk. And if that produces a good episode, cool. If it doesn't, okay, we try again next week.
No, I think it does, because that is you. That is you in the moment coming through. That's not what you thought about yourself and how do I want to be perceived. This is just in the moment. This is live, like.
And that's why I only bring on people I know, because I can have those conversations with people I know, or people whose work I am I've had people on that I've never spoken to, but I know their work almost better than they do.
Yeah, right.
When I had John Reddick on, he still talks about how surprised he was that I knew his body of work on Gen X Grown Up as well as I do. I'm like, well, I've been listening and watching for years, so of course,
Sure.
But I think that's where a lot of podcasts fall a little short. They get excited about having a guest on, which is cool, but then they have the guest on and there's no bond between, there's no investment in that guest.
Right.
It's just they're present for your show, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. A lot of people don't pick up on it. People that don't do interviews probably don't even pick up on that stuff. So,
Well, I mean, I don't do interviews, and I take note of it. But
you listen to a lot of podcasts, though, so you're
I listen
sensitive
to
to
a ton of podcasts. I think most of my family probably gets tired of me hearing, "Hey, I heard this on a podcast. You should listen." But it's a really good form of media because you can consume it while you're doing something else. It's not like sitting in front of a TV where you're kind of stuck there. Like I can be in my shop and I can get a bunch of tasks done and learn at the same time, and I think that's really, really special about that's what I love about podcasts.
I won't repeat it. I'll tell you afterwards. I won't repeat what was said, but I got a piece of advice right before I reboot, right as I ended Because We Make. I got a piece of advice from a certain person we've talked about probably entirely too much in this episode, but he said something.
I wonder who it is.
I wonder who. But he said something to me, and it made me realize that this is what I'm meant to do. And it kind of ties back to, it was the same with you, right? The way he was taught, the way you were inspired by him.
Yep.
The way this show is structured now was inspired by that same person with one thing that he said. And again, I will not repeat it. I will never repeat it publicly. But he said it to me. I feel
very special that I'm going to figure out what it was.
Oh my God. When he said it, I repeated it to my ex-wife.
Yep.
Just going, you're not going to believe. I said, you're not going to believe what Jimmy just said to me. And she goes, what? I said, check this out. And I sent her a screenshot of the chat that we were having. And she goes, well, he's right. I'm like, okay. All right.
Right. But I mean, when you find what you are, meant to do per se, it's a life-changing event. I mean, I've never been so happy as I am now, just doing what I love. And I work 7 days a week. I get up and I go into the shop just about every day. And I work around the clock, and it doesn't feel like work, one of the first days, it was like it was probably 2 days after I left my job. I got up early and I went on a hike, and there's this outlook near my house that kind of overlooks this highway. And I just sat up there.
I think I know where it is, actually, because I've been to your area.
Yeah. And it was just, I was looking at all the cars, and I was like, I don't have to drive to work right now. Like,
yeah.
And I was in this eternal sense of joy, and I just walked back down the trail, and I was just singing out loud. And I was like, I don't even care if anybody walks up. Like, I'm not going to stop singing. Like, I've never been this happy in my life. And it was like, I'm definitely doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Wow.
And just making things with my hands. It's always been, what I've wanted to do. I talk about how I went to machining school, and this was right after I graduated high school. My parents wanted me to go to college, and I was like, I'm not going to go away because I have no idea. And if I'm in a dorm room with a bunch of other guys, like, I'm just going to get myself into trouble. There's no way I'm going to behave and get my work done. So I went to our community school, having no idea what I was going to sign up for. And I just kind of sat in this classroom. I don't even remember how I got in there. And the woman was talking about, these are some classes you can take. And she's like, if you're a hands-on person, I'm the head of the manufacturing department, and there's 2 slots left. And if you're, kind of a hands-on shop style person, I was like, that's me. Like, I want to sign up. And it was just one of those weird coincidences. Like, I just happened to be in that class. Or in that classroom. And it set me on a trajectory, I think, because I've always wanted to make stuff. And while I do is not manufacturing per se, I can put that manufacturing mindset into a lot of the things. Like, if I'm building a bunch of cabinets and I have, 16 panels that all need to be this size, like, I'm going to batch them out and kind of try to make an assembly line out of it. And there's a lot of just lessons, I guess, that I'm able to apply into woodworking, similar to manufacturing, that I think has been really beneficial to me.
So you get the added benefit of getting to work with your hands, which is something you've always wanted to do. And then you get that pride of, that sense of accomplishment when you're done. You get to see a thing that wasn't there before.
Oh, yeah.
It's the greatest feeling in the world. Like, people that don't make stuff or that don't create stuff, I'm not downing them, right? This is not me downing them, but I'm just saying,
Yep.
you guys that don't make stuff, and I don't know how many listen to the show that don't make stuff, but will never understand the feeling of
It's amazing.
finishing a thing and having a thing. Like, I mean, I just realized that you got to see what I used to make in my day job. You got to see the
that
thing
was really cool too. Like, and
'cause-
I've heard you talk about it, but seeing it in person was like, oh, this is amazing. Like,
Yeah,
this is something you would see on a shelf.
yeah, it's what I do. I mean, and it's like, and I was just telling Christian this on Monday. That was so, like, one of the products I made was on the shelf at Brookstone, and I actually have a picture of one of the Brookstone locations with them stacked in the front of the store. And that feeling of seeing your stuff on a major retailer's shelf,
Yeah,
and that stuff that I made,
absolutely.
and oh my God, like, I just, even right
It
now, it's
is.
like, it's surreal, right? That's a feeling that people that don't make stuff don't feel. They don't understand it. They'll never understand it.
And, like, similar to that, I mean, it's different, but I built a big display case for our local coffee shop that holds like a bunch of baked goods and stuff. And you walk into the store and it's kind of right there, front and center. And they were on the news a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, "Holy crap! Like, there's the piece I made on the news." And I'm like, nobody even knows I made that, but I know I made it, and like,
you made it, yeah.
And it's just a crazy feeling. And I made that over a year ago, and it's that feeling doesn't wear off.
I had my first taste of that as a kid. My dad worked for a company that made all of the wood trim and furniture. They called it furniture. It's not chairs and sofas. It's like the handrails and all that stuff.
Okay.
And it was in a local mall, and we were walking around the mall, and we were walking down the stairs, and my father goes, "I remember making this."
No way.
And I'm like, I was a little kid, and even then I understood that that's a big freaking deal. I was like, "You made this?" Like, and he goes, "Every piece of wood in this mall, my company made, and I made all of the handrails for all of the staircases in the entire mall." And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, this is something my dad made. Like, wow, this is so cool. And every time we went to that mall, I would see those handrails and I would think, my dad made this. Like, this is really, really cool. I would see people carving their names into it, and I would get offended because they were carving their names into my dad's work.
Don't touch that. That's funny you say that. My uncle and my grandfather, they used to run a big cabinet shop. Like, they would do high-end custom kitchens and all kinds of custom woodwork. So I grew up around it. Even when I was little, I would just go in there and just glue a bunch of random scrap wood together, and I was in heaven. And I remember they were doing a project on a church one time, and they had these big pieces with these big arcs, and they were screwing some stuff together. And I was probably 8 years old, and they were like, "Hey, you want to send a screw in?" Like, "Yeah, you bet I do." And so I remember just screwing a thing into this piece, and then, there was the church, years later. And I remember being on a field trip. This was a fourth grade field trip. I remember driving by that church, and I was like, "I put a screw in that church." And my fourth grade teacher, I don't know what was wrong with her. She's like, "Oh, why do you care? It's just one screw." And I was like, "No, like, that's a big deal to me. Like, why would you try to tear me down like that?"
Yeah. Thanks, teach.
Thanks. But, everybody has that one nasty teacher. And
there's always going to be somebody that's going to crap on your dreams, and sometimes it's a teacher.
yeah. And those people always just push you to go farther.
Sure.
For me, at least, it's like, oh, I can't do this. You bet I can. Like, now I'm going to do everything in my power to show you that I can do it, even if it doesn't make any sense.
It's not who's going to let me; it's who's going to stop me.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting because that mindset of who's going to stop me. Sometimes it takes a big life change to kind of realize, like, I am capable of this. You get into a comfortable rhythm in your life, and you just kind of like coast through, and everything's cool. And adversity really does just kind of give you a little kick, or, you pivot on something in your life. It's like, oh, there's no turning back now. Like, this is an inflection point right here. Right here. So,
yep. And
Yeah.
that's when you just dig your heels in deep sometimes and
Yeah.
just really go for it.
Hey, cats fight best when their backs are up against the wall.
I did not know that, but
Yeah. Like when they
I
can't
believe
run, you corner a cat, you're in big freaking trouble if that cat doesn't want to be touched. That
interesting.
cat
Well,
will kick your ass.
cats typically don't like me for whatever reason. I think I move in a way that scares them. I walk into a room and there's a cat and it flies out of there. So hopefully I don't put a cat in a corner.
That's gonna be the subtitle of this episode. Christian Neary, scarer of cats.
Yeah, imagine. Well, that's a funny thing too. You said Christian Neary, and that's my name, and that's what I've always gone by. And it's so funny when I first started this company, Warren Werks. Warren is my middle name, for people who don't know. And I could always tell when it was like a spam call because it'd say, "Hey, we're looking for Warren," and I'd be like, "Yeah, that's." But now everybody thinks my name is Warren, and
I did.
lots of people do. People have DM'd me that, and I'm just kind of like, if you want to call me Warren, that's fine. Like I'm kind of just embracing it at this point. Like I don't really know what to go by. I don't care. I mean, I've always gone as Christian.
Lots Warren of people can be your stage Chris. Name.
Yeah, exactly. And what I've always said is, people who love me call me Christian. Everybody else calls me Chris, and which is really true. My friends and family all call me Christian, and but Warren is a great name too. I mean, I love the name. Clearly, I love the name because I made it my company's name. And
where did the name come? Oh, you said it's your middle name. It's your middle name.
It's my middle name. So yeah, when I was trying to think, because I almost made the name C. Neary Design, and I was like, that's just a little generic. I wanted it to be something a little less generic. And as I've said, I was big into cars, big into German cars, specifically Volkswagens. And so I was talking to my good friend Eddie, who's also big into cars, and when I was thinking about starting this company, and I was like, I'm thinking about making it like Works, like the German spelling with an E. And he was like, oh, you have to do that. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. And then I checked the domain, and Warren Works with an O was taken and with the E was there. And I was like, well, it's a done deal because now I have warrenworks.com. And
I'm surprised you didn't do a play on the Volkswagen logo with 2 W's instead of a WV.
Well, it kind of is. It is kind of the 2 W's is kind of an homage because the VW follows through, but I didn't want to rip it off. And my good friend Reese, he designed it for me. And this is the silliest thing. My birthday is on the 29th of October, and I was looking at the gear icon the other day, and I counted it, and I was like, holy crap, it has 29 teeth. So I texted him that, and I was like, dude, like, did this just happen? He's like, no, you asked me to do that. And I completely forgot that I didn't ask. And so it's just kind of a cool thing. So
yeah, it's funny because I didn't know your name was Christian until recently. Right. Oh, you know what? I know. I'll tell you when I found out when you started supporting the show.
Oh, interesting.
I was like, what? Oh, your name is Christian. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yep. Cool. Like I met you at Jimmy Speedway, and we chatted for, I don't know, an hour and a half, me, you, and Matt Make, and a couple other people.
Keith Decent was there. Yep.
Yeah. It was just a bunch of us just chilling. And it's like, I didn't even know your name. By the way, That happened way more than I'd like to admit. I bumped into so many people, said hi, talked to so many people, didn't even realize who they were. And then I met them a second time, and it was like, right. Okay.
Right. I can remember the place and I can remember the face, but to actually remember your name I'm probably going to forget it. I
know we said it before, but I'm really looking forward to it this year. Like really looking forward to it.
I've got a crazy idea for my cart, and Jimmy said this year he wants to be kind of wood inspired. So I'm like, well, I'm a woodworker, so I kind of have to go for it here. And
I'm really hoping. I've
got an amazing idea.
Somebody does like a soapbox, like a downhill soapbox type car for this particular.
Oh, that event would be cool.
I really am hoping. I can't do it because I don't have a place to put it, and I have no way to get it up there if I did make it. So,
well, if you do, we can put it in the back of my van. I'll come pick it up for you.
The only way it would work, and I know he's listening to this. The only way it would work is if I built it at Al's shop, and then we put it on his trailer and came across the river with it.
I bet I would do that with you.
He's probably going to message me as soon as he hears it. Goes, okay, so when are we starting?
Right.
I know Al.
Well, now it has to happen.
Exactly.
But yeah, I built a mini bike. It was one of my kind of COVID projects. Mm-hmm. And so I brought that with me when we went up last year because I was like,
that was your mini bike?
Well, there was a couple mini bikes, but mine was the really low one that
Okay.
was kind of. But yeah, one of the mini bikes was mine, and
Cool.
it did terribly on the track because it's so low. It kept like skidding out every time you would try to go, and it went all of 5 miles an hour around the thing because it's really not made to take turns well. But
That was probably the only.
this year I'm going to build a cart.
Yeah. You know what? I really want to build a cart.
You should.
I really want to build a cart. Like I've always wanted to go through that process. And you know what really inspired me to build the cart was Jimmy's coffin.
That thing was so cool.
Oh my God, it was gorgeous. The first time when I saw it, I was just like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Like the detail work with the wings and the pedals and what do you call it? Oh, the toe crusher. That's what he called it, the toe crusher.
Oh, that's right.
Oh man, it was
so cool to see him like totally in his element too, because I don't know if you remember the steering mechanism in his thing completely fell apart. Yeah, well, it stripped out because it was just junk metal, and so he just took a bunch of bolts and welded them all around it to kind of encapsulate this thing. He's like, we got to get this thing back on the road, and it was super cool to just see him. I have some pictures of him just welding. I was like, this is amazing to just witness in person.
I think one of my favorite parts of the whole event, was just seeing the creativity and what people produced. Was it Chris Alchemist 1964?
He's such a nice guy. He always sends me messages.
He's the best. He's the best, and he did the ladder.
Yeah,
he did the ladder, and it was just like, that's goddamn genius. It's like he did that, and then Art did some cool stuff, and it was
he had the crazy snowmobile powered. But the crazy part about Chris's too was he had it all taken apart in like a station wagon, and he showed up. And I was like, you're the alchemist, right? And he was like, yeah. And he was just putting it all together in the driveway. Like he totally disassembled this thing to even bring it there. And I was like, you're a madman. Like it was truly something to witness.
Such a beautiful car. Like it was really beautiful. The one that Bernie did was gorgeous.
That was cool too.
Oh my God. I had a lot of fun. Like I had the drone out over the track and I was flying the drone around and getting video of people, and I was taking pictures. Like Rob Rojas loaned me his camera. He's like, I'm going to take a couple of laps, play around with my camera for a little bit. So I got to play around with the camera I can't afford. That was really cool. And it was just like, it was so cool just seeing the parade of creativity.
Absolutely.
In that area.
And I remember telling like some of my family members, like, yeah, I'm going up to this go-kart event, and they were all worried. They're like, don't get hurt, make sure you wear a helmet. And I was like, no, like, I don't really know what to expect, but it's not really about the go-karts. Like it is, but it's about hanging. And like, I'm going to Workbench Con next month, and it's the same thing. Like, I don't really care about the classes. I'm going to just network with all these amazing people and just take creativity from anybody I can,
That was the same thing with me at Maker Camp this year. Like I went there, I didn't go there for any of the classes. The classes, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm probably going to do that next year now, right? Next year,
sure.
I want to take some of the classes, but this year I went there to hang out. I went there to see people I haven't seen in a while. Or people I've never met in person. And it was so cool. I have so many selfies. I think I had like 50 or 60 selfies with different people that I had not ever bumped into in person. And it was just so damn cool to see all these people in the real world.
I was, even the other day when we were up at your shop, I was so glad that you were like, hey, let's take a selfie real quick, because I never think to do that. The only time I really remember doing it was with Jimmy, and I felt almost a little awkward. Like, he's such a normal guy, and I'm like, can I take a selfie with you? He's like, oh yeah, of course. Like, but I just never think to do that with people, and I was glad that you did. Like, we're going to capture this moment and remember it.
It was funny at Maker Camp because I really wanted to. I had my camera bag all ready. Like I had multiple cameras, lenses. I had my drone. Like I was ready to just go there and document the absolute crap out of the whole show.
Right.
And I didn't. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because what it enabled me to do was I wasn't trying to just, it was like, oh, I chatted with this person, let me take a picture with them. Like just so I have that picture. Like I wanted that picture of me hanging out with these people who
totally,
for the first time, hey, we're meeting in real life. Like, this is awesome. But I was, in my mind, I was thinking, like, if you have a camera out and you're trying to capture every moment,
you're going to miss it.
Yeah, you're going to end up not paying attention to the actual moment.
Right.
And instead it turned into one of the literal one of the greatest days of my life. I think Maker Camp is one of the greatest events ever.
I have to go this year. I was so relieved when you told me that it's not going to be Columbus Day weekend, because you usually have prior obligations that weekend, and
I mean, you're not going to get a room. You're not going to get a room at the Blackthorn. Apparently, they all sold out day of. So we'll have to find something else. But
I don't care. I'll sleep in my car. I mean, I'll figure it out.
I don't know. I think I may. Al kind of jokingly said last year, was like, well, if you're going to come up all 3 days, you got a place to stay. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna have to take him up on that, because it's probably the only place that's going to be available is Al's guest room.
How far is he from there?
He's in Germantown, right across the river. So he's like 20 minutes or so.
Oh, that's not bad at all. I didn't realize he was that close.
Yeah, the last time I went up to hang out with him for a little bit, we went across the river over to Jimmy's for a little bit.
Nice.
And it was like, oh, okay, now I have a full perspective of how long a trip this is. It's really not that far.
I mean,
very convenient.
You would think living in Connecticut, I know New York towns better, but I really don't.
I mean, we don't know anything about Connecticut towns. The only reason I know where you live is because I've been there.
Right. Why have you been here?
So in October, was October? Yeah, it was October or the end of September. Connecticut Horror Fest was at the Events Center.
Oh, cool.
And the woman I was dating at the time was exhibiting there. So I was at Connecticut Horror Fest last year, and it was awesome. I had the greatest time. I don't know where it's going to be this year. I know they're not doing it there. I think they're doing it in Hartford, so they could do it in a bigger venue.
Stuff happens in Hartford, yeah.
Yeah, Hartford's the Hartford Civic Center is a much bigger venue than the.
I can see that building from my house. So if you're ever in the area, you should totally let me know.
It was a really fun 2 days. Oh my God, what a great show that is. If you've never, I don't know if you're into horror movies at all.
Not a ton. I mean, somewhat. I watch them, but I'm not like a horror movie buff.
It's worth it. It's worth it. There's a lot of signings that go on. There's a lot of memorabilia. A lot. Cool. And not all of it, I'm not going to lie, not all of it's licensed. I got some posters from a guy, and I know for a fact these are not
these
originals.
Are bootleg.
Got the one booth that I was really excited about, he had replica posters. They're clearly replicas. And it was like, buy a big one, get a small one for free. So the big one I bought was the original Hellraiser movie, which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And then it was like, okay, pick out a small one and you get both. And I was flipping through and I found the original Ghostbusters poster.
Oh, wow.
A smaller version of it, like tabloid size, like 11 by 17. So those are things I have to make frames for, not counting all the art that I've bought recently that I have to make frames for. It's like, maybe I should do a 1 day builds thing, but I'll do a 1 month build. That's what I should do. A 1 month build, do 12 projects a year.
Yeah, that's a good idea though. And that would be nice, because then you could really spend some time on it.
No, that's about how long it would take me to do one of your 1 day builds.
Well, I don't know about that. I've seen your cutting board video. You got all those done in a day, and
no, those are, oh my God, those are as mechanical a process as I've ever had doing anything in my life. The only thing I could do faster than making cutting boards is edit this podcast now. Literally, wow. This episode will probably be about an hour 30, hour 35, and I will have it. If I do it today, I'll have it completely done and ready to post tonight. And it'll take me
amazing.
It'll take 2 hours, 2.5 hours to do the whole thing now. When I did the first episode I recorded, which is the one with Al, even though Jimmy was my first episode.
That's right.
The first one I did was with Al. It took me 2 days to edit it.
I believe it. I mean, it's an hour and a half. It's an hour and a half video.
What kills me, and I have to figure out a more efficient way to do it. But what kills me is the camera switching. That takes time. If I was to just put you and me on the same screen with a cool background, it would take 5 minutes to edit this, because then I would just have to adjust audio levels, fix color, and throw B-roll in where appropriate. But it's okay. I like it now. It looks more polished. If I ever get a day job again, I might have to change the way it works. But for now, it's good as it is.
This is the day job. I mean,
I wish it made the money of the day job. It's the only thing.
Well, then more people, everybody listening, support the show. Come on.
You heard him. He's saying that as a supporter. So,
well, it's not. Sorry, I just cut you off there. But,
you're fine. Go.
You talked about when you were first starting the podcast back up that you had people support before it even started. And I didn't even know that you were starting the podcast back up. I don't know how I missed it. Just one day, because I had followed Because We Make, it just showed up like new episode with Jimmy Diresta. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll listen to this today.
He promised, it was the coolest thing ever. Again, we're talking about Jimmy, but it's
I
just a
know.
common element. Like,
Well, it's what brought us together. So.
It is. He told me if I ever brought the podcast back, he would be my first guest. So I was mulling it over one day. I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I messaged him. I was like, hey, I distinctly remember a certain person saying they were going to be my first guest if I brought the podcast back. I want to bring the podcast back. And his immediate answer was, when are we recording? That was the next sentence. When are we recording? Like, I can't ask for more than that. I can't ask for more than that. So
no.
But yeah, and then the amount of support that this show has gotten, I mean, it's way outstripped the support that Because We Make got, which surprised the hell out of me because that show had a 3-year run.
Right.
But yeah, it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome.
Good.
So, and I appreciate every single one of you. But before we get to me thanking and kissing all of your butts, why don't we do some things of the week? Because Christian, like a pro and a longtime listener, has brought 2 things of the week this week.
I have, yep. Okay, so my first thing of the week is definitely an oddball, but my first thing of the week is New York City. I think anybody who's in this area that drives through New York City knows it's a disaster to drive through, and you should take the GW Bridge next time you go because you're guaranteed to get stuck in traffic. And here's why I say that. When you're stuck in traffic, you can look around and there's just so much amazing stuff to take inspiration from. Like I remember I was stuck under this one bridge and there were huge arcs. They had to be, I don't know, hundreds of feet across. And you look at like just the scale and size of each one of these. And then there's 6 across. And then to go across the river, there's another 5 or 6 of those sections. And you just think about the amount of manpower that had to come together to actually make that happen. And it did. And that is on every single corner. You go in Grand Central Station, which was built, 110 years ago. And it's like, we have to hold a city up and stick trains underneath this. and it's genuinely incredible if you just take a second to like look at each piece. Like there's nothing for me that gets me more inspired than just looking at cities and the architecture, because you can look at the shape of a building and say, how could I make that into a table leg? Or it's endless. And so
New York City, as much as it's crumbling now, is an engineering marvel in a lot of ways.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And you could never see it all. And the fact that it just even is possible, it just blows my mind when you really take a step back and think about it.
As someone who just mentioned the George Washington Bridge, you want to hear something mind-blowing?
I'm ready to be mind blown.
Okay, that bridge doesn't look the way it was supposed to look when it was done. Do you know this story?
No.
Okay, the George Washington Bridge was supposed to look like the Brooklyn Bridge, but they kind of decided. I think it was because of World War II I think it was World War II. They didn't have the production capability to make the bricks, and they didn't want to waste production capacity making bricks for a bridge. And they just left the skeleton. That was supposed to be the internals of a brick bridge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that would have been slabbed in brick the same way the Brooklyn Bridge is. But instead they left the skeleton exposed because it was like, we don't have the capacity to make brick to do this. So we're just going to leave it the way it is and call it done.
Yeah, that's cool. I never knew that.
Wild piece of info for you, right?
Well, there's so much cool history and trivia, and that's what I mean. Like, there's just endless inspiration. It's one of my biggest pet peeves when someone says, "Oh, I'm bored," and it's like, take a walk around the house or down the road.
Oh yeah,
like there's stuff to see everywhere, and if you can't find inspiration in that, I feel bad for you.
When I lived in Suffern, which is not the most happening town. I mean, I'm sorry, Rob. But Rob Rojas lives in Suffern. We used to live literally 5 minutes apart. It's not the most exciting place in the world to live, but what it does have is some insane Revolutionary War history. And I don't mean just like, this is interesting. I mean like, holy crap, seriously? Like there is like Lafayette Avenue, which runs through Suffern, is named for the French General Lafayette. And there were spots with historical markers where George Washington met with Lafayette
That's
to
amazing.
plan things in the Revolutionary War. It's like, this happened
This
5
happened
blocks
right
from my
here.
house.
Right here.
You know,
Yeah,
200 years ago, George Washington was walking on this land. Like, what?
And yeah, I don't know how you wouldn't find just fascination in that.
It's interesting. I mean,
It is interesting.
it's
And that's everywhere. That's what I mean. Like, there's cool, trivial stuff everywhere you go if you just open your eyes and change the way you think about it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm always looking at everybody's house to see what kind of garage they have, because I want to know what kind of shop that they could possibly have, even though most of the people don't. And there was a house like 4 houses down the other day. I've lived here for 6 years almost, and I was like, oh, they have a garage. I've never even noticed that before. And this is 4 houses down. It's like, how do you not see this? And I'm someone who is very observant of that kind of thing. And there's just endless stuff to look at and take in if you're just willing to just consider it.
I love it. So New York City is thing number 1. What's thing number 2?
Thing number 2 is a little more practical. It's called cutlistoptimizer.com.
Ooh, okay.
And I use this especially when I'm doing plywood projects. You can type in all the sizes of your pieces, and it will spit you out cut sheets for where you can cut up your plywood. And it makes laying out your materials super, super efficient. And it's totally free. I think you can have it do 5 calculations a day. And then if you do more than that, you have to pay for it. But I don't know who's building more than 5 projects a day. So it's essentially free for.
Wow. Yeah, these are, I've always liked these calculators, but they don't, usually you do have to pay for them. This is actually really clean. I like this.
Yeah, it works amazing because you can enter in whatever your size of piece of plywood is. Like if you have an offcut piece of plywood that's 37 by 42, you can enter that in too, and it will still fit your pieces into that.
Wow.
And it's super resourceful.
That's pretty damn neat.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at. Okay, so I just did a sample. Wow. Okay, that's really, really cool.
It is.
That's
yeah,
really,
and you could
really
enter.
cool.
You could use it for just normal size boards too. You can enter in whatever and it can consider grain direction and blade kerf. Like it's.
Yeah. Put
Whoever
labels
made
on
it really thought about it.
This is obviously somebody who uses what he made, or what they made, I should say.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Well,
assume.
I use it too. I that has saved me, because there are times I'm like, oh, I'm going to need a ton of sheets of plywood, and then I enter them all in, and I'm like, oh, I need 4 or 5 sheets less than I thought I did.
One of the blessings of having made so many cutting boards in such a close period of time is I kind of know roughly now how much I need to buy to get a cutting board out.
Right.
Like I know how much wood gets me a cutting board in the standard sizes that I make them in now. And there's so little waste now, and it's just like I can feel my profit. I can feel my profits going up. And then those little scraps, I'll do something with those later, but there's so few of them now. It's not like, oh yeah, you're hogging off. The first time I went to the new place, I got a 10-foot board of Paduke, a 10-foot board of cherry, and then I just cut it straight in half, like an idiot.
Right.
Sounds like a good idea. Cut it in half, right? Well, no, because I make 18-inch cutting boards.
Right, and now you have a 6-inch offcut on both sides.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So
that was one of the great pieces of advice they talk about on Wood Talk. Like if you're milling lumber, cut it into your pieces first. Like don't try to joint an edge on an 8-foot board. You're going to be there all day and you're going to waste half the board. Like if you need a bunch of 2-foot pieces, cut it into 2-foot sections and then mill those. You're going to save a lot of wood that way.
So the second time I went there, I took my Ryobi cordless saw and a couple of sawhorses and and a ruler, and I measured it in the parking lot, and I made sure that I cut it where I could get 2 or 3 cutting boards out of it first.
Yeah. Yeah,
Much
I've
smarter.
definitely been the guy in the parking lot with a saw cutting stuff up.
Yep. But all right, this is a good one. Cutlistoptimizer.com. Definitely going to have that in the show notes. I think a lot of people are going to benefit from that one. This is actually the cleanest one I think I've ever seen. Like it's
great. All the other ones I've used, they don't work well for me.
No, me neither. And again, usually you have to pay for it. If a couple of cuts out of one sheet, if you can take 5, that's all I need. This is great.
Well, no, that gets you 5 calculations. You can enter 100 numbers.
Oh,
you can do 5 full cut sheets per day, which is
That's
so it's
that's generous as hell.
yeah,
Unless you're running a
and
cabinet shop, in which case you should be paying for this. Go pay
right, and
for
then
it.
I think you can pay a couple bucks to have it for like a day unlimited,
Love it.
which I've done once or twice.
Love it. This is really good. This is a really good one. Well, I'm going to give a practical one too, because last week I gave a video game. And not that anyone complained.
Practical.
No one ever complains when I give a video game or a movie. I could give a movie recommendation. Last night, Diana and I watched the movie Violent Night on Peacock with
I don't
the
know if
guy
that one.
David Harbour from Stranger Things. He literally plays
Oh,
Santa Claus, stopping mercenaries from keeping hostages, a rich family a hostage.
wow.
Crazy ass movie. Loved it. So there you go. But that's not really a thing of the week. My thing of the week is a YouTube channel. And it's a YouTube channel that I have learned a ridiculous amount of stuff from over the last couple of weeks. Like if you're watching this on video, you've seen the result of me watching this channel. You've heard the result of me watching this channel. The channel is Premiere Gal. It's youtube.com/@PremiereGal. She is an absolute wizard with Adobe Premiere. And that's what I use to edit the show. That's what I use to edit the podcast. So I've been watching her videos, and I swear in every video, there's like a light bulb moment. Like every single video, I learned the shorts. When I make the shorts are the biggest pain in the ass of making this podcast, because I have to kind of find my way back to it. Usually what I'll do is I'll mark off where I'm going to clip the shorts after I'm done, and then I make the shorts. But there's so much tweaking to get them down under a minute. And then and the audio and the making sure everything works. Sometimes I have to change the conversation a little bit just so that the short will work. One of the things that I learned watching her channel is how to make the audio duck automatically in Premiere. I didn't even know it could do that. But
what does
now,
that mean to duck?
So basically, if you and I had a music bed under us right now, this would basically take that audio and lower it so that it's behind our voices rather than at the same level.
Okay.
iMovie does this automatically, by the way. iMovie will do this.
It does.
Which is kind of crazy.
That's what it's called.
But yeah, I've learned so much. I swear, I don't know how she does this for free, but she has 432,000 subscribers. So I'm not like finding some hipster found it before everybody else channel. It's her videos are amazing.
Great.
She does Premiere. She does a little bit of After Effects. She does a little bit of other stuff, but she focuses mostly on Premiere. And if you're a Premiere user, you need to be watching this channel. She's absolutely wonderful. She's a great teacher, and she understands how normal people look at Premiere. She's not doing it from a hyper technical point of view. So I would highly recommend. I think her name is Kelsey. She never says her name. She just introduced herself as Premiere Gal. So, which is, if somebody names themselves after a piece of software, you're probably safe listening to what they have to say.
Right. Absolutely.
So, definitely check her channel out if you're using Premiere. It's wild how much I've learned from her. You know what else is wild? That a bunch of people support this show financially and listen to this every single week. People like Matthew Serio from Artigiano Serio, Big Al Schultz of New York Woodworks, Tori Decker of Tori Did It, Ed Swanson of Ed's Clocks and More, Jake Drews of Make with Jake, not Make with Drake. That would be a very different channel. Megan Chris from Onyx Designs Woodwork, Christian Neary of Warren Werks. Look at that. I know that guy. Jeff Stein, aka A Weird Guy, Kim and Garrett from Kim and Garrett Make It, Rory Langefeld of RLL Woodworks and DIY, Robert J. Keller, Rebecca Cole of Beck C Designs, Brian Arsenault, the Seven Hills Maker, Lars Coleman of Colorado Multicraft, Dave Bauer of Dave Bauer Art, Nick Birchtold of Birchtold Design Build, Jeremy Spees, Mike from Pixels to Prototype, Donald LeBlanc of Fun with Woodworking, Grant Alexander from the Clamp Podcast, Brad Harrison of Brad's Customs, and Billy Polton of Polton Projects. Thank you so much to everyone that supports this show financially. It is tremendously appreciated. Believe me, it is tremendously appreciated. Every once in a while, I go into the bank account that all those payments go into when I'm in a bit of a bind and there's something in there, and I cannot tell you how much that means to me, because you are definitely helping me get through a time that has not been easy. So thank you for all of that. If you can't support the show financially, then you should just stop listening because I have no use for you. No, I'm kidding. I really appreciate it. Whatever you could do to support the show is tremendously appreciated. Share the show, write a review, whatever you could do to turn a new person onto the show. That is, of course, appreciated because people listening are what my goal is for this show. So do whatever you can, and I appreciate all of it. So thank you. Christian, it's been an absolute hoot, man.
Yeah, this has been great. I want to let you know that every time I hear you read my name, I always do that. I go, woo woo, like no matter where I am. And
I won't support a podcast on a tier where I don't get to hear my name because I'm vanity focused. So I want to hear my name in the credits on a podcast. That's my goal.
It feels good. It feels good.
It does. And I love, it's funny if I think about how many people I'm supporting versus how many people are supporting me. If I just stopped supporting all those people, then the people supporting me would probably be worth a little more. But I was talking to Artigiano Serio, Matt, about this. And I said, if I ever start pulling my sponsorship on Patreon, just check in on me. It's really gotten bad. The people I support because I love what they do. And I hope that the people who support this show feel the same way about it.
Absolutely.
So, Christian, where can people find more of you and what you're up to and what you're doing at any given moment?
So right now I'm probably most active on Instagram, and that is Warren, WARREN _works, WERKS. I post on there. My stories are pretty much daily. And then lately I've been hitting YouTube hard. So that's just Warren Werks on YouTube. I do have a website, but I'm not too active on there, and that's just warrenwerks.com.
Okay. I'll have those links in the show notes. And thank you so much for coming on. And thank you for being one of the supporters on that list. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate having something to listen to every Wednesday morning.
Woohoo! That's what a lot of people said when I canceled Because We Make. It's like, what am I going to listen to on Wednesdays? But, we will be back again next week. I think I have an idea who the guest is going to be. Not 100% sure. But I might be recording another episode in a couple of days, which is kind of wild. But that's the benefit of being able to record during the day. And you guys get to benefit from it. So hold tight. There'll be another episode next week, and I will chat with you then.